words, dear listeners, warm audience, wise audience, please don't be disingenuous. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and smash that bell button. And we would love to hear your comments as it supports the channel. And please be intuitive that you be able to receive this sage advice and paramount morals of the story. I want to say some copyright disclaimers. I have no legal rights to the music video that you will hear. Your discretion is advised. Parental advisory is advised. Under copyright disclaimer, under Title 17 U.S.C. United States Constitution, Section 107, allowances is made for fair use. And research. Fair use is permitted by copyright status that might and research, comment, news report, scholarship, teaching, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright status that might otherwise be infringing. Hopefully I'm paraphrasing from saying nonprofit, educational, personal use tips, the violence in favor of fair use. Without further ado, dear listeners,
slow things down. Just a little bit of time. Another demographic that has been affected, clearly has been affected by the Trump assassination attempt, so-called, is the mouth-foaming, Trinity-infested liberals, the woke left, the deranged left. Immediately upon the failed assassination, there were all these calls for further attempts to assassinate Trump. Jack Black infamously did so in a concert in Australia, which led to his entire tour being canceled in Australia. What an idiot. No talent bum anyway. Who needs him? These liberals see no contradiction in demanding gun control, demanding the necessity of stripping law-abiding citizens of their guns, and their firearms, and everything else. But they have absolutely no qualms about calling for further assassinations on Trump. And recently there was another failed attempt. And the background of that guy, he looks like a whack job, supposedly appeared, and I haven't confirmed this yet, I haven't had time, but supposedly he appeared on yet another BlackRock commercial, so we're already starting to see these certain patterns emerge, which will get tongues wagging, especially amongst the service level types. Back when Otrama was in office, well, he's still running the show, at least on behalf of his masters, but at any rate, back during the Obama administration, you criticize Obama to the slightest degree, within minutes, practically, feds would be at your door. They really put the stamp of Bolshevism, of communism into place, especially with Clinton. You saw that really coming in hard. It had been going on all along liberal Democrats, especially with Clinton, and then it went into overdrive at Obama. Point being is that there is yet another example of a particular demographic, in this case the mouth-foaming woketards, going crazy about the Trump assassination attempt but for all the wrong reasons. They want bloodshed, they want more death, they want more destruction. These are entity-infested sewer scum. So right there, I've given you 3 examples, and there's probably more if I really wanted to split hairs, about how this failed assassination attempt, or what appears to have been a failed assassination attempt, had such a profound effect on so many people across.
You don't buy gold coins to make money. You buy gold coins because the dollar is going to go down. I don't trust the dollar. For most of my life, I've seen gold and silver. That everybody can buy a $28 silver piece. Everybody can afford $20. Well, will they do it? No. Look at the stock market. It's not going to down. It's dead. I emphasize again,
basically saying there isn't going to be one, you may as well be on the rich end.
Absolutely. And what most financial books say to you is live below your means. Don't have a cappuccino. If you have the opportunity, one of the lessons in the book is go back to school. Yes, but also I learned finance on the streets where he learned it at work. Right. So it's still possible to learn.
It's always about being rich or doing something in this world that doesn't just bring us money, but doing something to give back or making an impact somehow, whether it's a building project or a corporation or something of that sort.
Well, hopefully, but that's why we wrote this book together. We don't really need the money, but we are concerned about the economics of our country.
Explain for us, Robert, how there is no middle class anymore. What do you mean by that, and what quantifies and qualifies somebody as being in the middle class?
Well, there's many reasons for that, but the middle class is not getting ahead. The rich are increasing, but the tax laws are written against the middle class. So we just got together. We said we can't change the tax laws right now, but we can change people. So we'd rather teach you how we got rich, so that other people can move up rather than move down.
Mr. Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki. I am honored that you're with me.
So somebody just starting out, this whole craze about using your own realtor, going to Staples and finding these kits online and somehow saving yourself some money, you could lose money in the end?
Well, you could, but if you did that, I would still recommend you get a real estate attorney to check over the transaction. You could probably save a few dollars that way. But it is a legal transaction, and you got to be very careful, because if it's your primary residence, you don't want to be evicted in the middle of the night.
We're back. Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki. Define rich.
Look, rich is a state of mind more than anything else. If you feel you're rich, and if you're happy, and if you have a wonderful family, you're rich. And this doesn't just have to do with money.
Define it financially.
Forbes defines it as $1 million a year in passive income, whether you work or not. That's a specific definition of it.
Sometimes it's daunting to say, I have a credit card with fill in the blank $10,000 on it. It has a 30% rate. So that's going to be the front I tackle. When I have one with $800 on it, so I can feel that sense of achievement and progress.
I agree with David. Interest rates are important. But the way my wife and I did it was we had like 15 line items we had to go through. We took the first one we could pay off the fastest. We hung it on our refrigerator, and when we paid that thing off, we drew a line through it. And we kept drawing lines through it. So I didn't go after the interest rate, which is good to do. I went after which one can I attack first. I do mean attack.
Robert, where is all of this going? It seems that it is high political season to sort of target the rich, make them look bad. You're saying that we should be pursuing becoming rich ourselves and not bashing those who already are. Do I have that right?
That's my example. If you think the government's here to help you, I think you're badly mistaken. And I think there's no difference between a Democrat or a Republican. They both come from the same bowl of pot. Look at John Kerry and George Bush. They went to the same school, belonged to the same societies. And as you and I know, it's the political action committees that determine which way the votes go. So I really feel for the poor and the middle class simply because they have no representation in Congress.
Now more than ever, people need to go to them and plug into that cellular memory, plug into the device source, and catch as much as possible from the matrix. Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're listening to Bartley's Commentaries on the Cosmic Wars. First of all, happy birthday, America. Today is July 4th in America, Independence Day, and we should always honor and remember and cherish that holiday, no matter where in the world you live. If you live anywhere and you cherish and you value freedom, then I encourage you, if you're really not aware of all the major points, the salient points about America's War of Independence, it's never too late to get your nose in the books and do a bit of reading, because it's going to be time well spent. The founding fathers of America had a couple of things in common. They were absolutely brilliant. Generally speaking, you would be hard-pressed to find in any era such a collection of absolutely brilliant minds, people steeped in libertarian constitutional values. Indeed, they're the ones that created the Constitution. But also the bravery of these individuals, the strength of character, the integrity. Always remember, only a tiny fraction of the colonists rebelled against the crown. Something like 3% of the people rebelled. The rest were content to stay on their farms, stay in the taverns. But that 3% changed the course of history. And I'll tell you right now, it would have put up with the level of tyranny that we're seeing on a daily, nay, moment to moment, minute to minute basis. One of the issues I'm going to address today is the siege mentality. They being the oppressive, ruling sewer scum, want to be ruling sewer scum class, they have effectively placed everyone on this planet into a siege state, siege mentality, siege status. And those people who are aware of what's going on, at least the surface level aspects of it, I can feel your pain, I can feel your emotional distress, the endless slings and arrows of more fear-mongering, more hype, more racial divide, more race-baiting, more communist indoctrination, more Luciferian crap, over and over and over, incessant, a veritable avalanche of it. And even if you make a point of tuning out all that rubbish, mind-destroying, corrosive rubbish from the lamestream media, it's virtually impossible to get away from the memes and the narrative, because you're just virtually surrounded by these bovine. I used to say that these people were slaves.
Thank you very much. Okay. Let's see, can I clearly communicate this message this evening? This evening I had a special message. I woke at 4 o'clock. Understand there are families in Europe who've been doing this for the last 4 months. Cash is required to save. You're now in a position to earn income from it. And that sort of evolved in my mind to the thought process. Wait a minute, this is bigger than we think. So let me try to paint a picture for you. I say the creature and the blessing. And here's the creature. That's based on the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. The Creature from Jekyll Island is about the creation of the Federal Reserve. Now, for those who haven't read that book, for those who still may not be in the know, you do not understand that the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's not owned by the government. It's owned by a handful of rich families that got together in 1913 on a little island outside of Georgia called Jekyll Island. These were the richest people in the world. And they conspired and they designed a plan to control the entire world through finance. To control and enslave and dominate this entire planet through finances. And understand there were families in Europe who've been doing this for the last 400,000 years anyway, and they understood that if you can control a country's finances, it matters not who makes the laws. Rothschild himself is quoted as saying, let me control a country's finances, and it does not matter. Let me control their money, and I don't care who makes the laws. And to conspire with the people of wealthy families in this country as pure to put together a plan to control the finances of this country and enslave and dominate the entire population. They created in 1913 the Federal Reserve System. Okay, so they could put this manipulation process in place. They realized they could create and print money out of thin air. They've been trying to do this for years, but in 1913 they finally implemented the plan. They found a secret meeting now. You understand? It was so secret that when they went down to Georgia, when they identified themselves, when they were on a train trip, it was secret. They knew what they were doing. This is a conspiracy. It's not me talking. It was a conspiracy of the highest order. Okay? And they understood that if they can create this Federal Reserve, put it in place to make people think it's a bank owned by the federal government, then they can print money out of thin air, and every time they print money and sell it to the government of the United States, they can charge an interest for that money, and that interest on that money will be paid to their families for generations. And they would can maintain control and keep control of the country's wealth in the top 1%, which they've done for over 100 years. Now, how do they go about implementing this plan? So, well, we got to figure out how do we go about implementing this plan? First, we create the Federal Reserve. Okay? We convince everyone. We must convince everyone because see, 100 plus years. So people need to go with money and paper with paper. So they had to go about convincing everyone that paper is now money and gold is a commodity. Plan number 2. They said we got to put an indoctrination system in place. How do we put an indoctrination system in place that'll last for generations? We create a free educational system. They create a free educational system. What do we teach the kids? We teach them what we want to teach them. But we teach our kids something different, but we teach the majority of the population what we want to teach them. We teach them paper and money, not gold. We teach them that it's better to have a job and not a business. We teach them it's better to have a job and not be a free enterprise and not take you through your life. We teach them it's better to have a job so we can now collect taxes. Wait a minute. We got to put a tax system in place. The exact same year as Mark Price just told us. When was the federal tax system put in place? 1913, the same year the Federal Reserve was done. What do we do with the tax system? We take the money first, and then we give them back, and we got to convince them we're doing them a favor, but we're going to take their money first, we're going to give it back to them in the form of refund. Thank you for the interest-free loan. And then, wait a minute, we can also steal their money through inflation, without them even understanding that their wealth is being taken every single month as we deplete the value of the dollar. And by the time the average person figure out what's going on, they're 65 or they're dead. And the plan came into full effect in Bretton Woods right after World War II, because not only did they say we now have control of the dollar, we're going to make the dollar the world's reserve currency. So every single country on this planet pretty much has access to the dollar. And every time we print the dollar, our families get wealthy and wealthy and wealthy just by printing this dollar in this $1.4 trillion paper currency world. That creature was created, and it kept the wealthy in place for the last 100 years. We're talking about a handful of families for generations. We don't even call names. Many of us know who they are. Over 100 plus years. But now the writing is on the wall. I sent out a text today by Tennessee Congress. He talked about what's going to happen in the next 40 hours on September 30th, when the Chinese government introduced the yuan and all these currencies are going to be backed by gold, and then we have a sacrifice of third world currency on the scene, and one that's backed by gold. The impact that's going to have on a worldwide global scale. I'm not an economist. I can't speak to that. But it created a sense of urgency within me. This is after I'd written this. It created a sense of urgency to, oh my grace, I told Dr. Bell, what cash do we have in the bank? I'm taking it all out tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen on September 30th. You know me.
The endless slings and arrows of destroying corrosive rubbish from the lamestream media, it's virtually impossible to get away from the memes and the narrative, because you're just virtually surrounded by these bovine. I used to say that these people were slaves, the masses of humanity, especially in the Western world, but that's not quite accurate, because slaves know they're slaves. And you really can't even call them, well, yes, they are domesticated. They are a form of livestock, but the quadruped variety of livestock on our planet, they know they're livestock for the most part, right? They know that they lead pitiable, miserable existences and that they're a food source. This latest iteration of what passes for humanity 4.0, 5.0, 9.0, who knows how many, in the briefing papers Bob Lazar read in his time at S4, if memory serves, there was something in there about at least the Greys, the Zeta Reticulians, being one of the genetic engineering groups, had genetically altered or corrected the human race something on the order of 28 times by the Logan. So you could hear them right? But that's just Hollywood. They have the tactical and strategic high ground. They can literally enter into and take over their dreamscape from within. What I've called, and Candy Turner and I talked about this decades ago, stage-managed dreams, right? Things you've seen in Freddy Krueger, which is Hollywood has been cramming down your throat and into your eyeballs. all this time, and later it really degenerated into just sheer blood and murder. It's almost like people like John Wayne Gacy, and I'm not trying to be funny, but people similar to John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer sat around, oh, let's write some screenplays. Let's make movies. Let's make slasher-type movies, right? But that's just Hollywood reptilian institution, if there ever was one, prepping you, cramming you with this information from a sadistic, psychotic perspective, and essentially non-human perspective, cramming it in your face and making it seem like it's cool and trendy to be scared of the theaters. That is the reality that's been going on all along sub rosa, and then now it's come out into the open. But for those people who've been, quote unquote, demonically tormented, or have had stage managed dreams taken over by reptilians, greys, or you name it, they live these Freddy Krueger nightmares, but in real time, in a way that no person with only a 3D understanding of space and time could understand. Because these people are literally trapped within their own bodies at night, paralysis. They can't wake themselves up, and they literally have, for lack of a better term, but a term that some Christians might understand, a demon inside of them. Call it reptilian for people like us, and BS, demons do get into people. Different.
I agree.
To say that these people were slaves, the masses of humanity, especially in the Western world, but that's not quite. And you really can't even call them, well, yes, they are domesticated. They are a form of livestock, but the quadruped variety of livestock on our planet, they know they're livestock for the most part, right? They know that they lead pitiable, miserable existences and that they're our food source. This latest iteration of what passes for humanity 4.0, 5.0, 9.0, who knows how many, in the briefing papers Bob Lazar read in his time at S4, if memory serves, there was something in there about at least the Greys, the Zeta Reticulians, being one of the genetic engineering groups, had genetically altered or corrected the human race something on the order of 28 times by that point, okay? So 28 different times in the evolution of the human race, there was these corrections, these genetic alterations. And that's just one race, that's just the Zetas. But who are the Zetas really working for? I would argue that at least some of the gray factions work for the reptilians. They work for the Draco, they work for the Orion Empire, essentially. So this latest version of humanity, it is a domesticated livestock race. It's not just a slave race, as some who follow the works of Sitchin and others, the Anunnaki Chronicles, for lack of a better term, would have you believe that, oh, this is just like a slave race and they've been created to do the mining. Yes, they've been created to do the mining and much more. They're essentially a livestock race. They're essentially just meant to be part of a big end times type harvest. So I'm no longer calling them slaves because I've never known since recorded history of slaves who didn't know they were slaves, right? And Frederick Douglass, the late great black abolitionist, said, and I'm paraphrasing here, and you've heard me say this before, that a slave is first shackled in his mind before he's shackled in his body. And that's exactly what we see today. These slaves moving along, wearing their mask, and utter abject terror due to all this fear-mongering. And getting back to the Founding Fathers, they were the 3%. The other 97%, I wouldn't say the other 97% at that time were mindless automatons like we have today, but I would say that they decided to keep their head down because they felt they had more to lose, or if the crown did impose a total tyranny, and you have to understand by that point, one of the key points behind the rebellion, one of many, the taxation was just a small part of it, and typical of the controlled publishing, controlled academia, that they would endlessly harp about the taxation, right? Without representation. It was the fact that a central bank was foisted, or was attempted to be foisted on the colonists, and also the quartering of troops. Colonists were expected to allow British troops or British mercenaries, Hessians, for example, to be quartered, to live in their homes, no questions asked. And a lot of people said, no, that's not on. I'm not going to let these friggin' smelly foreigners come in here and just, put their feet up and just lounge around my house and order us around and abuse our family. It ain't going to happen. So they rebelled, 3%. And I'm telling you, the Founding Fathers would never have put up with this amount of abuse. They would just become irate, livid at any suggestion of taking away their freedoms. And we've seen gradually and incrementally over time, and now it's progressing by leaps and bounds, this effort at, the enslavement of humanity for all intents and purposes. That's already in the can. Now we're seeing the harvesting, the slaughter of the livestock being run off the cliff. So let's look back on the 4th of July, Independence Day, a holiday they're trying to eradicate in America. And just remember what those colonists fought for. Then you look at the American Civil War, the war between the states, the war of northern aggression, right? Two of the key battles, Vicksburg and Gettysburg, Vicksburg, Mississippi, far more important than Pennsylvania's Gettysburg, and the campaigns happened simultaneously. But Gettysburg to this day still gets most of the attention, most of the publicity. But Vicksburg, and you've heard me talk about this before, it was a far more, from overall strategic standpoint, far more critical campaign. And it was a brilliant campaign by General Ulysses S. Grant. And the Confederate forces were besieged in Vicksburg, which is right on the banks of the Mississippi River. And in a brilliant campaign, Grant, leading up to the battles within Vicksburg itself, in the siege of Vicksburg, Grant outmaneuvered his opponent and essentially surrounded Vicksburg and besieged Vicksburg. And it was a siege that lasted for a couple of months. The campaign began around, depending on who you talk to, and then what key moment in the campaign, generally from May to July 3rd, was the length of the Vicksburg campaign. The Confederates were cut off from reinforcement. They were having to deal with bombardment from the Federal Navy, artillery barrages from the Federal forces under Grant's command, and eventually the commander of the Vicksburg garrison, General John Pemberton, who was originally a Union man, a Federal man, coming from Philadelphia. He had married a woman from Virginia, and it gives you an example, yet again, of the divided loyalties, how that war created schisms right in families, where sons were battling fathers, and brothers were battling brothers, and cousins were battling cousins, and in-laws were battling in-laws, and kind of like what we see now in a different way. And General John Pemberton, commander of the Confederate garrison at Vicksburg, surrendered on July 4th, 1863. That opened up the whole of the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up north, and essentially divided the Confederacy. And in overall strategic terms, it was far more important, especially since over in the east at Gettysburg, General George Gordon Meade did not follow up his defensive victory at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He should have run Lee's army down into the ground after Gettysburg, but he let, like so many before him, had let Lee slip back into Virginia. So Vicksburg, Mississippi, was the key battle of July 1863, and it was a siege. And how do we characterize a siege? A siege is when one force surrounds another force, one military force surrounds another military force in a given location. The city of Vicksburg, for example, in Caesar's Gallic Wars, the siege at Alesia, Vercingetorix, however you pronounce his name, was the leader of a confederation of Gallic tribes that rebelled against Julius Caesar. And Caesar had surrounded the forces of Vercingetorix, prevented any reinforcement, and gradually began the process of starving out the Gallic tribes. And that is a characteristic of a siege, where you're surrounded, the besieging force, the outward force trying to take a citadel, trying to take a city, trying to take a fort. They make it so resupply is virtually impossible. The people within the garrison, within the besieged location, have no access to the outside world, no reinforcement, no means to replenish, reprovision. They're essentially cut off from the world. And that creates its own unique stresses, right? And there have been a number of sieges throughout history, some of them quite long. Some of the sieges lasted weeks, months. The siege of Malta by the Ottoman Turks, 1565. The siege, in modern times, Malta again in World War II. It was being bombed constantly by the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. The people were under siege. And a siege mentality takes root, and that's what I see happening today, because the real information, the information we know, which contradicts all the nonsense that's being spewed out, is being suppressed. We're just peppered, pelted with constant lies from the lying media. That is reinforced by the bovine mutterings of the livestock class around us, who just endlessly repeat what they've heard and what they've seen, because they've been lodged, enmeshed into their R complex, where they're in fear for their miserable, pathetic lives, and they would presume to hold their lives and have more value for their lives than for us, right? And so they would have no qualms about taking away all of our rights just to assuage their fears, just to make them feel better, just so they can comfortably curl up into a fetal position and suck their pacifier or their thumb at night. They want to take away everyone else's rights and in the process kill them off, because they're too stupid to realize how dangerous these treatments are. So a siege mentality is set in. On the one hand, for the people that are switched on, at least at a surface level, they know about the depopulation, they know about the spike proteins, they know about now the graphene, in the treatments, let's say. And my colleagues and I have been talking about this from the start, the transceiver nature of the nanotech, the sending and receiving, and when they get excited by external frequency waves, that it can engender all kinds of effects, responses, behavioral responses, physiological changes and illnesses within people that have received the treatments, let's say, whether it was through the testing, like getting something shoved up their nose, or by getting the jab, right? It's a state of siege where the bovine classes, they just feel they're under siege because they can't stop watching the TV. It's an addiction for them. And then the people that have an idea, at least at a surface level, what's going on, they see it as a siege too. Well, they may not consciously think of it as a siege, but they're starting to develop that feeling of what it's like to be a cornered animal, what it's like to be hunted, what it's like to be behind the 8 ball. And now with all these strident demands for mandatory treatments all across the board, that feeling of that siege mentality of being surrounded, of being cut off, it is accentuated. And the slings and arrows are coming in fast and furious. The media just relentlessly demonizing the so-called unvaxxed. It's the unvaxxed that are responsible for the Delta variant. It's the unvaxxed that are responsible for the spread of this contagion. It's the unvaxxed this, it's the unvaxxed that. Every time you pass by a TV news station, it's vaccination, unvaxxed, vaccination, mass vaccinations, 80%. It's just relentless. And it underscores again just how evil the would-be rulers of this planet are, where they can just lie through their teeth, through their media, to compel people, to browbeat people into willingly taking on toxins that will potentially kill them, or at the very least shorten their lives. And it adds to that hunted feeling, that cornered feeling, that behind the 8 ball feeling. And again, I think of all these sieges throughout history, the siege of Leningrad. Some of the people had to resort to cannibalism in order to survive the harsh winters there in northern Russia, northern USSR at the time. It's a siege mentality, and it's difficult at times to not have a feeling of being prey, of being hunted, of being hounded, of being backed into a corner, painted into a corner. And that's exactly the mentality they want us to be in. Instead of federal cannonballs, flying in, federal shells flying into Vicksburg or Atlanta. I'm not picking a particular side in the American Civil War, the war between the states, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just using the example of a siege, right? In this instance, it's not artillery shells, or the case of the siege of Alesia in Caesar's campaigns, catapults, the scorpions, so-called, to shoot this bolt, this pointed, barbed, heavy bolt, quite a distance with quite a lot of accuracy. And it's not just like one or two of these scorpions, we're like dozens of them just being blasted away. It's being fired at the Gaelic tribesmen earthworks, right? They were quite accurate. Instead of being pelted and assailed that way, we're assailed by crass stupidity. We're assailed by the bovine acceptance of people. Every time I go out and I see these people all masked up, they just got this hangdog expression on their face, this bovine acceptance. That's part of the PSYOP too. Because remember, the founding fathers, there were just 3% of them. And those 3% changed history for the next 200 plus years. And then when I go out and I just see all these cattle, all these domesticated animals in the guise of humans, it's hard for me as a person by my nature, as a spiritual warrior, and within my breast is ignited and will always remain ignited the lambent flame of freedom and liberty. Call me judgmental, sticks and stones, etc., but I can't help but looking at a lot of these people with a certain degree of disgust. I can't help it, because they are a force multiplier for this system. So in the case of Alesia, when Caesar's forces had besieged the forces of Vercingetorix, his forces, and we're talking entire tribes, a conglomeration of tribes that rebelled against Caesar, fighting for their freedom, basically. And Caesar was the first to say in his commentaries, they're fighting for their freedom. Well, yeah, definitely they were, right? Caesar's not going to mince any words. He's not going to play any games. Caesar was a conqueror, and the Gaelic tribes are fighting for their freedom. And Caesar said that. Food became an issue, as food is starting to become an issue now. Okay, the siege mentality is heightened. What we're seeing with this attempted mass treatment program is just the latest in a series of siege tactics, right? False flags, the never-ending attempts to take gun ownership away from Americans, the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan flooding Europe and flooding the UK and flooding America with these raping mob minorities, and they're trying to turn them into majorities, right? In the UK, you have the Paki grooming gangs, so-called. You have the Islamists of all stripes just attacking and raping children and just doing all these horrendous things, right? That's part of the siege. The incessant gaslighting from the media, that's a siege weapon. It may look different from a catapult, it may look different from a bolt, but it's still a part of the siege tradecraft. You have the incessant cancel culture, LGBTU, cultural Marxism, in your face constantly. That's part of the siege weaponry. And those of us in the know, at least at the very least at a surface level, we see all this slings and arrows literally coming in from every direction. Yeah, at times this war weariness kicks in. There's something somewhat akin to combat fatigue, even this mental combat fatigue, right? At this point we didn't have to undergo the physical combat, right? You know, think about those Marines in the Army in the Battle of Hue, just the stupidity of their higher command sending them into Hawaii that was already in the possession of like 10,000 NVA regulars and they're the hardcore mainline VC battalions and NVA battalions. And these people, those communists, some of them have been fighting for decades, right? Whereas the Marines that were just sent in there with no prior intelligence and their leadership just with their blinders on, thinking that the North Vietnamese army, what they call the People's Army of Vietnam, just was not capable of taking over a city the size of Hawaii, right? And it goes back to what Sun Tzu said, know who your enemy is, know your enemy. If you know who your enemy is and then you know yourself, the outcome of 1,000 battles is assured. Words to that effect. You can look it up, right? Know who it is you're fighting against. I mean, I do. We're up against the Draco-Orion Empire and all their hybridized minions and the weaponized cattle here on the surface, right? Well, Sun Tzu had a lot to say about the ground, the field of battle, right? Know your ground, know the terrain, know the environment, the battle environment, right? And getting back to the Battle of Hawaii 10 offensive, these Marines were just sent in there into a meat grinder, and their stupid idiot commanders just goading and hectoring the frontline commanders. Advance, there's nothing there, and they got chopped up. They got chopped up big time. And then when the Marines got some reinforcements, they had to go block by block, house by house, floor by floor. Some of the worst city fighting American combat troops have ever undergone against a fanatical enemy. Brave, tactically savvy. Like I said, some of these communists have been fighting for years, fighting the French. They weren't fighting the French, they were fighting the Chinese, who were fighting somebody. A lot of combat experience. And those battle-hardened Marines and also the U.S. Army troops that tried to cut off the main route of resupply for the NVA and the BC. But particularly the Marines, because they were in the city of Hawaii. This combat fatigue and this mental and physical exhaustion had set in day after day after day. No safe places. It'd be blasted by rockets, blasted by mortars, blasted by snipers. And I just can't imagine the kind of mental anxiety that would induce. Now, I'm not comparing what we're going through to that, right? I wouldn't disrespect combat veterans who've had to put up with that. But I would say that from a mental duress standpoint, the constant pelting, when you hear the old term to be pelted or being pelted down by rain, it goes back to this term, peltast. In ancient times, these were slingers, and these slingers were trained from childhood, and they would fire like these lead weights great distances. You get nailed with one of those suckers, you get nailed in your shin, fracture, compound fracture, you're out. Laying around in an ancient battlefield, there ain't no triage system there now. You're better off getting one of those lead weights right in the skull, take you right out. You get hit any other part of the body, you're going down. They were peltasts, they would pelt. They would be, along with the skirmishers, they would go ahead of the main force. And along with the archers who would fire their arrows, these peltasts there'd be dozens of them. Places like the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean, who were frequently used as hired as mercenaries by this, that, or the other army. And they would just be raining down these lead weights, stones, whatever they could fire, and they were accurate. And they would come down like hail, right? Imagine having to go up against that. That's what I mean, being pelted. Just the crass stupidity is a form of siege warfare. Every time you go to the store and you see these bovine, masked up cattle trying to police you, trying to boss you around because they're in fear for their pathetic, miserable lives, and they're placing their lives, holding it in a higher state of value than yours. They want you to do what they do, and so you can die too, a miserable, pitiable death. That mentality, it contributes to the siege mentality. There's almost no relief. Because even if you, like I said, even if you made a point of avoiding the news, you're going to come across all this cattle that will endlessly repeat the news, endlessly repeat the fear-mongering and the hype. All these variants popping up now, it's all fake, it's all bogus. As you know, they weren't even able to isolate the original problem, let alone, and then everything is an inversion. When something mutates, it's weaker than the original strain. But now these mutations are more powerful than the non-existent original strain. Knowing this, knowing that all that is a justification and a distraction and a psyop, so it can add to this siege mentality. Getting back to Elysia, before I forget, because the whole thing about food, and now because they're hyping up the climate change thing and they're using the weather weaponry to increase the temperatures. Not too long ago it was Texas, now it's Pacific Northwest and the western part of Canada. They're just burning those people up with ridiculously high temperatures. I mean, 121, 122 degrees in places in Canada. I experienced that in Bullhead City. I experienced that in Las Vegas. I experienced that in Laughlin, Nevada, right? Bullhead City, Arizona. But we just don't expect that in Canada, right? But right on cue, Project Veritas had gotten that one guy on video saying that, oh yeah, we're hyping up the scamdemic, and we did everything we could to destroy Trump's presidency and yada, yada, yada. Next, we're going to hit him with a climate change. He said that. We're going to hit him with a climate change again. Right on cue. And again, this adds to the whole siege feeling of being besieged, right? There's people in Pacific Northwest and people in Canada that are being hammered by heat waves. And probably some directed energy manipulation as well. So you have the endless immigration of increasingly in the U.S., especially now recently, with the open borders, and they're just pouring in. You have the Codenhof-Kalergi plan, Europe at large. I mean, France, Italy, lots of areas in the UK, completely unrecognizable now. And the existing native majority is been reduced to a cowering minority, right? Because of the Frankfurt School type of just us system of justice there. They'll never get a fair shake, and then these types were brought in specifically to run them up, okay? To cause all these problems. That's part of the siege mentality. That's part of being besieged. So now they're using climate change, weather weaponry, directed energy weapons, increased horrific heat, food shortages, drought conditions, the distribution networks, distribution chains, the food distribution system, the food growing system is all tanking. That's going to lead to widespread starvation. And at Alesia, the chieftains got together and they said, look, we're starving. We're running out of food. We have to feed the warriors, right? Because they knew they were painted into a corner, folks. That's what I mean. They knew there was no going back, okay? Because if they were lucky or unlucky, and they somehow survived the siege of Caesar's forces, the best thing they could hope for is to be sold back into a life of slavery, right? And that's why they were rebelling in the first place. A lot of them weren't slaves, but they've seen how their fellow tribesmen and women and children were taken away as slaves, right? So they were rebelling against that. There was no going back for them. So the chieftains got together and said, let's offer up the women and children to Caesar's forces. Because even if they're taken into slavery, at least they'll survive, right? And we won't have to share our meager, fast dwindling resources, provisions, food with them. Key point. See, there were two lines of defense. There was the initial line of entrenchments, and the Romans were the great engineers. Years of ancient time, they built these fortifications surrounding the Gaelic tribes in this hilltop, which is known as Alesia, and that hemmed in the garrison, had hemmed in all the tribesmen. They created a larger ring outside of that, facing outwards, to prevent any reinforcement from coming, okay? And the tribesmen just sat there and watched day after day, week after week. These Roman legionaries, every single one of them, a trained engineer, just build these fortifications all around them, watchtowers, the whole bit, trenches, spikes, everything. Food was growing short. Okay, let's offer up the women and children to Caesar. They just said, no, we're not accepting your women and children. And the tribesmen had the heartache of having to watch their loved ones starve to death. Because that's how it was back then. Still is, actually. Caesar said, not my problem. I'm not going to take them on. More mouths to feed. You keep them. And the chieftains had already decided we're not going to feed them because we have to feed the warriors. So again, like I said, they watched as the poor women and children, their own families, perish, die malnutrition, starve right in front of them. The Romans looking down from their watchtowers, just observing, right?
point of relevance is, desperate times call for desperate measures. That's what the Gallup chieftains had decided, and Vercingetorix, the commander of the Confederation of Tribes, said, yeah, that's pretty harsh, but that's what we'll have to do. And the way that the distribution networks, the prices are going up because of the fiat currency is being so devalued by the incessant printing of fiat currency. It's all digital. Nothing's really being printed. It's just going to cause widespread food shortages, and it's going to lead to more crime, more dissolution, more chaos in the cities, and that adds to the stress levels, and that's part of the siege. So, how does one overcome this? Well, first, I would remind you, the listeners, dear listeners, that if you've followed this kind of information, if you've done your own kind of research, if you have more than a surface level understanding, you know that you've been through something like this before. Maybe not something this extreme, where the potential exists for your consciousness / soul, call it what you will, could be essentially trapped, held in some kind of limbo, potentially forever. Okay? I know that certain ET groups, certain real evil type of demonic forces, have the means to trap and ensnare consciousnesses and souls. But what we're talking about is the potential for these dark, archontic, Sauron-type forces to do this on a mass scale. Millions, hundreds of millions, potentially billions. That much being said, many of you had lived and died through the upheavals of the past on this planet. Atlantis, Lemuria, celestially driven cataclysms, and just a friendly reminder, Planet X, Nibiru, the second sun, call it what you will, it's still there, okay? You don't have to believe me. It doesn't have to be part of your world outlook, your understanding. That's perfectly fine with me. I'm not here to tell anyone what to think. But I do feel that second sun, Nibiru, call it what you will, is in our solar system, and it's heavily populated. Let's leave it at that. And contributing in a big way to these so-called Earth changes. So these forces of evil will today have the means to do all this and then some. They had the means back then, but they just didn't have that large of a livestock population with which to do all this. Now they do. That much being said, many of you in your past incarnations on this planet have endured horrific things, lived and died. And I mean, you just look at Mount Vesuvius, and what happened to Pompeii, and what have you. I mean, what a way to go. That was the end of the world for them, that's for sure. Must have seemed that way. And some of you have lived through horrific invasions in your past lives, died through horrific invasions. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you're combat veterans, each and every one of you, of the cosmic wars. It's not only have you lived and died, sometimes in quite gruesome fashion here on this planet, in previous incarnations, but you've taken part in the Orion Wars and other wars throughout the galaxy, throughout the universe. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to put too fine of a touch on it, too fine of a gloss on it and say, oh, well, BD, DD, you've been there, done that, this old hat, not your first barbecue. No, I would never try to marginalize or minimalize the desperate straits that we're in now, right? I think you can call upon, even if you don't have any conscious memories, your soul retains all of those memories. Your DNA, your morphic resonance field. We're going to be increasing casualties. We're in the process of a mass die-off, of an extinction level event. And also the potential of what may come after, unless we throw a spanner in the works, unless we find a way to dismantle this control grid, this control system, and send these evil sewer scum packing. Not only packing, but ideally wipe them out of the product. Where there's a will, there's a way. And before I end this first segment, I'd like to give a little warning, a public service announcement. This whole talk is something of a warning. It has come to my attention that there is this so-called grassroots movement in Australia, an anti-New World Order resistance movement. And one of their stated goals is to, using common law, to bring to justice all these perps, and if necessary, the most guilty and those guilty of the most heinous crimes will be executed. Okay? Well, I've checked this group out, and I must say, right off the bat, I cannot take them seriously because their OPSEC is non-existent, operational security. They're going to put up a website, and they're going to encourage people to enlist, essentially, right? To sign up. And I mean, how can I take that seriously? And they're saying sign up at any level, including admin. Oh, we always need admin people, right? What a great place for a spy to infiltrate into, the admin job. Access to all these names, contact information, addresses, et cetera, et cetera. And the OPSEC nature, or the lack of the OPSEC, it is a red flag for me because, I mean, could you imagine a member of the French Maquis, the French resistance in World War II, right, being hunted by the Gestapo, and then he's going to take the time to tap onto a wall in the plaza of his town, a message. Oh, we're recruiting for the local French resistance, the local Maquis. Please meet at Pierre's barn on Saturday night, right? Of course, that wouldn't happen. It's absurd to suggest that anyone would conceive of that as being, anything other than ridiculous. But I see no difference in this group who are planning to put a website out, encouraging people to join. They're saying that they have all these people already in tow. Military, ex-military, law enforcement, etc. They're all ready to make a move. Well, just do it then. Don't tell us about it, and don't go on a recruiting drive. If you've got all these assets, talk's cheap. Actions speak louder than words. Make a move, bust a move. But don't go on to a recruiting campaign and try to get all these people to join when your OPSEC sucks and it's basically non-existent. Oh yeah, I'm a leader of the French resistance. I'm going to tack on a sign-up sheet in a local town plaza. Sign up to fight the Nazi occupation and to take out the Gestapo. Yeah, meet at Pierre's barn on Saturday night, which is basically what they're doing. So how could I, as somebody I've studied this stuff all my life, I've been a part of the intelligence community, how can I take something like that? And seriously. I think the problem is, one of the problems is, we have not had yet a well-defined, what I call a Doolittle raid moment. Let me explain what I mean by that. In the early part of the war in the Pacific, in World War II, it was nothing from an American and a British and Australian perspective. Well, I'll take that. Let me rephrase that. Mostly from a British and American perspective. It was just unrelieved disaster and failure and catastrophe. One after the other, just nothing but failure, defeat. Until this, what amounts to a covert operation involving thousands of people, which we now know is the Doolittle raid on Japan. A lot of things had to come into play for that to happen. And I just don't have time to go into it, but it's a fascinating story. But I'll just cut to the chase. The plan was to launch on April 19th, 1942. But the problem was they were sighted by Japanese picket boats. Admiral Yamamoto, in his wisdom, knew that at some point the Americans may try a raid, some kind of a bombing mission from aircraft carriers. He'd never dreamed that the Americans would launch medium bombers, B-25 Army bombers, from the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. The point of relevance was the task force was sighted, and Admiral Halsey, who commanded the two-carrier task force, ordered the American Army bombers to launch. And they were launching well beyond their fuel capacity. The plan was to launch from the carrier, Hornet, bomb targets in Japan, including Tokyo, and then fly to China, fly over the coastal areas, which were controlled by the Japanese, and land at pre-prepared airfields. It was not going to happen. Mix up and incompetence. There was no airfields ready for it. Right? But by being forced to launch early, hundreds of miles early from the carrier, they were almost certain to run out of fuel before they got to China. Now stop and think about that. Now let's backtrack to the beginning of the mission. The USS Hornet was the newest carrier in the United States Navy. It had made the trip from the East Coast and through the Panama Canal and went up to my old stomping grounds, my dad's old stomping grounds, Naval Air Station Alameda, USS Hornet parked and took on board 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers. And the commander of that group was Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, James Doolittle, one of my personal heroes. When I was a boy growing up in the streets of Daly City in San Francisco, every kid my age knew who Jimmy Doolittle was. It didn't matter if they were. I lived in the projects, which was the housing for military dependents, Army, mostly Navy, some Marines, some visiting Air Force, right? I don't recall seeing too many Army brat kids there. But even outside of the projects, the kids we knew from school, the kids we knew, from in City Street, let's say, they knew who Jimmy Doolittle was. Everyone at my age group knew who Jimmy Doolittle was, you could not know. First of all, he was born in Alameda, California, which is in the Bay Area, and then his exploits after that, right? So there was a personal angle for me because, where the U.S. carrier Hornet docked and took on board the B-25 Mitchells and Doolittle's crews. I'd been to that naval air station. I'd been on board aircraft carriers there as a young boy, USS Ranger in particular. Both ships that my dad was stationed on. And, the Navy guys were resentful. It's like, what are we, a ferrying service and loading all these Army bombers to us? It's like they want us to, I guess, take this somewhere. What do we look like? A towing service? We're like chauffeurs for the Army now. A lot of the Army people were pissed off. That Army people are taking back. The Navy people. Because it was all
Jedi are thieves and selfish liars who bring nothing but death. Back off. Attack me again, I'll strike you down.
So what happened was Admiral, he was an admiral yet, he was a captain still, commander of the Hornet, USS Hornet. The original name was Commander 11, Task Force 58, Task Force 38. And two different designations at times. These were the fast carrying task forces. But that's, a couple of years, a year and a half. Captain Misha commanded the Hornet. And he was letting them secret. They knew where they were going to go. They were going to bomb Tokyo. Right? So they used the crane to hoist all those bombers onto the flight deck of the Hornet. And Doolittle had been training his crews incessantly in short takeoffs. They didn't know why. They didn't know why they had to, be able to lift off within 400 feet. Well, now they knew why. Because their planes are being built out of an aircraft carrier. They had been trained by a Navy guy how to properly and take off on such short space, right? And it wasn't until the task force was underway at sea. It was the USS Hornet. It was just escorting cruisers and destroyers and oilers to refuel the ships in the task force, as well as replenishment ships that with supplies to replenish the ships underway at sea. It wasn't until they were beyond the Golden Gate Bridge out into the Pacific that Captain Misher, over the PA system, the intercom of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, announced this ship will take the Army bombers to the coast of Japan for the bombing of Tokyo. And when he said that, there was first momentary stunned silence, and then sustained cheer from every part of the ship. And then it all made sense to them. As a matter of fact, the commander of the Marine security contingent on board the Hornet, when he got his first glimpse of Doolittle, he couldn't get this feeling out of his head. I've seen this guy somewhere before. And then it dawned on him that this Lieutenant Colonel Doolittle guy is the same Doolittle who set all these world records: altitude, speed, endurance. He invented blind instrument flight navigation and flight controls. That was a Doolittle invention. He created that. And when I worked at the airbase at Naval Air Station Long Island, I got to know some naval aviators, Hornet pilots. One of the things I always like to talk about was Doolittle, because he trained at Naval Air Station North Island. I think that's where he learned how to fly. Right? So, what do these old school naval aviators want to talk about? When I'm sitting there and having a couple with them, I want to talk about Doolittle. He invented blind instrument flying, which basically means Doolittle, with the help of Sperry Rand Corporation, created a flight pattern control system, artificial horizon, altimeter, etc., etc. He pulled a canvas awning over the cockpit of his plane, took off blind, flew around for a while, landed at blind. Okay? So now, aviators are no longer relegated to flying only during the day or only during good weather. They can fly anytime. And that was because of Doolittle. Okay? Have you ever been on an airliner, and you took off at night, or you flew through fog, or you landed in fog, you can thank the late, great General James Doolittle. A real-life alien hunter, by the way, later on in his career. So, getting back to the story, the commander of the USS Hornet announces on the PA to the whole crew of the Hornet, we're going to bomb Turkey. Sustained cheering on the whole ship. And then, using the blinker lamps, using the semaphore blinking lamps to send Morse messages to the other ships of the task force. They advised the other ships of the task force what they were going to do. They're going to go bomb Tokyo and other cities in Japan. The crewmen on board the Hornet could hear the cheering from the other ships in the task force. Every time the other ship was advised by the semaphore blinker light system of what they were going to do, what their mission was, they could hear all this cheering coming from across the ocean. The body of water separated the ships. They could hear the cheering from every ship in the task force. Now understand, every single person in that task force knew they were heading deep into Japanese-controlled waters. There was no going back. And then they rendezvoused in the ocean with Admiral Halsey's task force because they needed one carrier to launch the bombers, and they needed another carrier to provide combat air patrol, air cover, fighter cover. So they rendezvous in the middle of the ocean. The people on the Enterprise, a Halsey ship looking over, what the heck? It looks like there's a bunch of Army bombers on board. Didn't compute. Because they'd rendezvoused with the Hornet task force. And then Admiral Halsey said over the loudspeaker, we're going to bomb Tokyo. And again, sustained cheering. See, these people had known, like I said, nothing but defeat for months on end. That's all they've known. Defeat after defeat, humiliation after humiliation. They were aching to strike back any way they could. And understand, they purposely charted a course towards Japan through the worst possible weather to provide them with, cover, basically. So when they were found out, and Admiral Halsey had, with his semaphore blinker Morse system, blinked over, with the lights, with the message, Army crewmen, man your planes and launch. That was it. They had to go. And in the silly movie Pearl Harbor, it was a chick flick disguised as a war movie. They show the Army bombers led by Doolittle. Just shows you how much Hollywood hates America. Of all the people, all the actors they would task with portraying Jimmy Doolittle, they get Alec Baldwin, this obscene, America-hating, just sewer scum, right? They get him playing a foul-mouthed Doolittle, and Doolittle was not a foul-mouthed individual, to play an iconic American hero. That's how much Hollywood hates America. So anyway, in that silly movie, it shows them launching the bombers in clear blue skies, placid seas, nothing of the sort. the bow of the carrier was going up and down with the waves, a difference of 30 feet from the trough to the height of the wave. They had to launch each plane just as the bow of the carrier was being pushed upwards by the waves. Because if the plane took off at the edge of the carrier while the bow of the ship was plummeting downwards in the trough of the wave, the plane would have went straight into the ocean. Right? Get this. Doolittle said to the crews after Admiral Halsey ordered the planes to launch, because Admiral Halsey's responsibility was the protection and the safety of the two carriers. The Americans were running out of carriers in the Pacific. They only had 3 or 4, including the New Hornet at that time. They could not lose anymore. The Japanese outnumbered in carriers 2 to 3 to 1, right? So Halsey, understandably, wanted to get his carriers out of hostile places. Hence his order to launch Doolittle's planes hours ahead of schedule. And Doolittle said to some of the crews that he gave them orders to launch. This offer still stands. Any of you can back up right now. Nothing more will be said. We have replacement crews. They should take over your ship. Well, nobody said anything. Doolittle got under the lead plane. And in so many words, when Doolittle asked that, do you want to back out? Any of you back out? Because by then, it had dawned on everyone that it was essentially a suicide mission. They were not going to have enough fuel to make it to mainland China. Right? Let's stop and think about this. All those Americans out there, all those Brits and all those Aussies and all those militant, big shot, tough guys, right? And you haven't really fought for your countries yet. Fighting against the Taliban, and they gave up Afghanistan. That does not constitute fighting for your country. I don't care what you think. I don't care how much you relive your glories in your podcast, because I've listened to them. And none of you, hardly any of you, have any self-reflection of how you've been used and how you've been played. So don't come around trying to big shot me with how you fought for your country. The biggest fight is yet ahead. The biggest fight is now, right? And when Doolittle said, anyone want to back out? Okay, no one's going to back out, fine. Doolittle turned, he got on his plane. In other words, Doolittle was saying, I'm going with you or without you. I'm going to fly my ship, my B-25 Mitchell. I'm not going to even turn back. You can go with me or you don't go with me. I don't care. I'm Jimmy Doolittle, right? And of course, when Doolittle was able to get that plane off the flight deck in less than 400 feet, okay, the other guys followed. The other crews followed. They bombed their targets in Japan, turned towards China. Providentially, fortune favors the brave. Fortune favors the brave. They had a powerful tailwind that pushed most of the planes to mainland China, not far enough to get beyond the coastal areas controlled by the Japanese. Right? Some of the planes had a ditch in the ocean near the shore. Others, crews in a bailout. Some crash landed with the crews on board onto Doolittle's plane. Once they got over the Chinese mainland, he ordered his crew to bail out while he held the plane in steady. He bailed out after everyone else did, and he landed literally in a shit field. Because in China, at nighttime, they have what they call night soil, where the farmers bring out buckets of human excrement, and they use that as fertilizer. So they scoop up all this crap from the latrines, and then at nighttime, at dusk, they bring it out to the fields, and they use it to fertilize their crops. And here comes Doolittle bailing out of his plane in a parachute, literally lands in a ship field. And there's a picture of him, sitting down near the wreck of his plane. I'm going to be court-martialed. I'm going to be arrested if I make it out of here. I'm going to be arrested because this mission was a total flop. Well, it wasn't a total flop. It was a pinprick as far as, especially the later air raids are concerned. Mega bombing missions and firebomb missions under LeMay later on, but that was fast forwarding a couple of years, 2-3 years in the future. But although it was a pinprick, the effect it had on the American populace to be able to finally strike back and do something, and also the chain of events that it triggered. Admiral Yamamoto got what he wanted. He'd been pressing for some time to conduct operations in the Coral Sea and Midway, and both turned out to be especially Midway turned out to be a resounding defeat for the Japanese. All that was set in motion by Doolittle's raid. Doolittle was promoted, 2 grades to Brigadier General and given the Medal of Honor. Later on, he commanded Army Air Forces in Northwest Africa, and later he commanded the mighty 8th and 8th Air Force in England. But the point of relevance is, you see, we haven't seen a Doolittle raid yet. We haven't seen something happen of a definitive nature when we can say, yep, that's the good guys doing this, right? This is why these stories of the white hats gain so much currency, gain so much momentum, and now you have this group of Australia where they're going to be advertising on a website for people to join up so they can eventually arrest and execute all the bad guys that are running Australia. That's just ridiculous. But the only reason something like that gains any kind of currency at all is because, people want to do something. They want to strike back. This is what they want. They want to hit back in some way, the same way Doolittle did. And we haven't had that. We haven't had a Doolittle raid, the Doolittle mission yet. And I don't know if we will. You know why? Because a lot of these active military people, the retired military people, they got their officers. They got pensions, they got families. They got a lot of moves. I talked about the Battle of Hawaii earlier. Those were 17, 18-year-old Marines. They had blues too. A lot of them never had adulthood lives like we did. Sorry for the bad English. Right? Look at the Doolittle Raiders. They knew they were not going to have enough fuel even to make it to the Chinese mainland. They went anyway. Because what they were doing was more important than themselves. And those guys had families too, back home in America, and loved ones. They were on a classified mission. So, while you military types and ex-military types that are reliving your glories in your podcast, and another thing, and I'll leave it at this too, is just sick of the fanboy mentality. When I go into these military-oriented Facebook groups or listen to these podcasts on YouTube, you read the comments, and most of them are a bunch of fanboys. And you point out this, they seem to think that these military people that they worship and idolize are infallible. They never make mistakes. When you point out that, such and such commander made a lot of mistakes in this campaign or that campaign, they just get all bent out of shape. Like it's just upsetting to them so much to think that these guys are not infallible, that they make mistakes, and some of them are, except in their quest for glory.
and fame, which is not a good enough reason, to throw men's lives away in combat. There has to be a bigger purpose behind that. But you can't tell that to these fanboys, right? And like these fanboys don't know what we know either. They don't know about what's going on. They just like idolize and worship the military. They don't realize how controlled it is. It's run by the Secretary of Defense that hates America. It's run by this digital, virtual president who hates America. And that's who the commander-in-chief is. Right? And they're still hoping Trump will come back and somehow save all this. The whole thing is ridiculous. So I'm calling out all you military types out there. Right? If you're not going to do something, just shut the F up. I don't mind you talking about some of your experiences in your podcast about freedom of speech. I'll fight for freedom of speech till whenever. A million lifetimes down the track. I'll fight for freedom of speech in general. And I know some of you have to walk on eggshells. You don't want to be, banned from YouTube for talking about certain things. But at least speak in a way.
No fear of faith. No fear.
Be as elliptical as you want. But kind of let it be known to those watching that you have an idea of what's going on.
To God be the glory.
Right? That you're not just reliving past glories. Right? So that's why these fake movements, this movement in Australia, if you ask me, it just a means to get gullible, hopeful people who want to strike back to recruit them, so they wind up, being tossed into camps one day, right? So just keep that point in mind. That there's this group out there, they're recruiting all these people. Australia are trying to, and their OPSEC is non-existent. In fact, it's a joke. So, we haven't had that Doolittle raid moment yet. I'm not holding my breath for it. But you never know. I mean, you never know how this thing will play out. It's not written in stone. So anyhow, I just wanted to get, these thoughts out there as far as the siege is concerned, as far as the Doolittle raid moment is concerned. What the Doolittle raid meant for Americans and, free people everywhere back then. Anyhow, thank you for listening. And for our dear members out there, we've got something for you. Be coming up with a part 2 before too long. And for those of you listening now, wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing, have a very pleasant time. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Conflict in the Ukraine and getting some perspective and trying our best to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. One of the problems that we've got is that on both sides, nobody really knows what the truth is and if we're being lied to or not. We all are exposed to spin, and we make our opinion off of that spin. Therefore, our opinions are not our own. They're the opinions of the people that were creating the spin in the first place. They wanted you to have their opinion, not your own. So this is about trying to be part of the solution. And if you're not part of the solution, then because of being affected by all this spin, people can become part of the problem just by developing an opinion that is not really their own opinion. So President Biden warned that a direct NATO-Russia clash would trigger World War III. Biden refuted, it says, I think they mean refused, increasingly desperate calls from Kiev for NATO to intervene against Russia. This is the big problem. Now, in looking at what the problem is, there's a whole bunch of facets going on, and there's stuff that we don't get to hear, and there's stuff that they don't get to hear, and then there is stuff that's just basically fake news. And so how do you sift through all of this? Well, I gave you one method that I try to use, which is look at what's going on, what people are being told on both sides of the issue, and then sort of strip out the differences, and whatever is common is the root cause of the problem. But in my video from my 2015 presentation on why Russia feels surrounded, I present this map, and it starts with just a few NATO countries back here right after World War II, and then it creeps closer and closer and closer. And then the Iron Curtain, East Germany, and all of this dissolves and becomes part of the West, and the border goes back to what was the USSR, and then the USSR collapses, and it goes back to Russia here. But you can see that Russia and NATO share borders now in Turkey, Estonia, and Latvia. And so this is one of the big issues. Vladimir Putin made a speech recently, and in there, he confirmed this. They also started implementing plans, he's talking about the Ukraine, to join NATO. Moreover, the Kiev authorities also announced their intention to have nuclear weapons and delivery vehicles. This was a real threat. So this is trying to look at it from both sides, but I don't like this guy. I don't trust this guy. I think he's probably a combination of snake and weasel. But then again, that's the opinion I have of most politicians. So he always seemed like a pretty sneaky guy to me, though. So I'm just trying to look at both sides, and I'm not defending him at all. But more importantly, in that speech, there was more information. He says there was a network of dozens of laboratories in the Ukraine where military biological programs were conducted under the guidance and with the financial support of the Pentagon, including experiments with coronavirus strains, anthrax, cholera, African swine fever, and other deadly diseases. Frantic attempts are being made to conceal traces of these secret programs. Now, are those frantic attempts being made to conceal traces? Well, we didn't hear anything about this until he made this announcement. And now we have stuff like this is Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin vows significant reaction if Russia uses chemical or biological weapons. Now, I'm using this story to demonstrate how it's very easy for mass media and big tech to sort of lead us around like cattle with a nose ring. This is very sensitive, and when you put a rope on there, you can get the cattle to go anywhere you want. Well, if they want you to take on their opinions, to not develop your own opinion, but to be influenced by them, this is very important because your opinions create your emotions about a subject. And when our emotions get the best of us, that's when the worst can happen. So in this interview, this is Face the Nation, which I believe is the oldest news and commentary show on TV. And the interviewer / host here, I'd like you to watch this. It's real interesting. It happens somewhere around 5 minutes or so in the interview. But she says to the defense secretary in a chilling video, Vladimir Putin said that there were dozens of biological labs in the Ukraine that had been funded and supported by the Pentagon, and China echoed the statement. And then she follows that up with what would you do if Russia attacked with biological and chemical weapons? So she's taking this from them, the country that is being invaded by Russia, having those weapons, to what would you do if Russia attacked with those weapons? And this is very easy for it to slip past somebody, and then with the answer and stuff, you think the question, well, you forget all about the video in which Vladimir Putin first discusses this and says that those labs are there, that the U.S. has been supporting them, and maybe it's true and maybe it's not. I don't care. What I care about is the spin that this host and commentator and interviewer put on this thing to control the audience and develop an opinion and feelings in the audience. And so be very wary of this. Watch this. This is just bad reporting, bad journalism. She should be ashamed of herself for doing this. Anyway, moving on. I'd like everybody, if you get a chance, watch this Yale University presentation, the program on Russian, East European, and Eurasian studies, how the United States created Vladimir Putin by Vladimir Posner. And it looks like it's 2 hours long. It is not. It's 40 minutes long, and then the rest of it is all questions and answers. But there's an introduction that is 6 minutes long. So it's actually only 34 minutes long. If you go here and select 1.5 times playing speed, you're going to be able to watch it in 22 minutes. But it's very important. And in here, he says a couple of things that sort of hit me, and I wanted to read them to you as quotes. He talks about the movie, the 1983 movie, The Day After. And I watched it, and there was a message at the end of the film that just comes up in text. And it said, "The catastrophic events you have just witnessed are, in all likelihood, less severe than the destruction that would actually occur in the event of a full nuclear strike against the United States. It is hoped that the images of this film will inspire the nations of this earth, their peoples and their leaders, to find the means to avert the fateful day." And then he goes on and he does a quote from Hermann Goering, who was at the Nuremberg trials and was interviewed by a journalist. And Hermann Goering said, "Naturally, the common people don't want war. Neither Russia, nor England, nor in America, nor for that matter in Germany. That is understood. But after all, it is the leaders of a country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism, exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country." And so, these things from the past are a warning for our present right now. So, getting back to the presentation. In the presentation, Vladimir Posner says, but we should try to understand exactly what did happen. And I froze that frame there because that hit me. This is the understanding of how we got here, what created this. This is critical. And I'm going to suggest at the end of the video a way that many of us can be a part of the solution to this. I'm doing what I can to try and alert people that, we don't have to end this with World War III. So, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, which was founded in 1945 by Albert Einstein and the University of Chicago scientists that had developed the first atomic weapons in the Manhattan Project. Now, in 1947 or 48, they started something called the Doomsday Clock. And it's a clock that they would set once a year. They would have a meeting and see what the risk is of some global catastrophe that could end modern civilization. Now, I don't know about you, but I sort of like modern civilization. I get to sleep in a dwelling that not only protects me from the elements, from rain and such, but I've got air conditioning and heating. And then when I forage and hunt and forage for food, I do so in the aisles of the supermarket. We are much better off than the rest of the animals on this planet. And so I don't want to see modern society end. And the doomsday clock has been set to 100 seconds to midnight. Now, this doomsday clock was a big thing back in the 70s and the 80s. When we were having the Cold War with the USSR, they were setting this forward and backward all the time. I don't think it's ever been to 100 seconds before. This is the closest that we've been to doomsday. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s, they only meet once a year, and that was over with within, it happened, and then it was over with in a matter of just weeks. So they did not reset it then. It probably would have been 10 seconds to midnight or something like that. But once again, we did not learn from history, and we're at this very dangerous time. Now, I want to end with this again. If you didn't watch The Pale Blue Dot, please watch it. I think that this one, titled The Best Speech About Humanity, Carl Sagan, is the most well-produced one. People say that they watched it and cried, and I have watched this more than 50 times. It's less than 100. It still makes me just quiver inside, and tears come to my eyes when I watch this. If you have watched it, watch it again. If you haven't, please watch it. But anybody out there that speaks Russian or Ukrainian, please translate this video into those languages. If you can dub it, or if you can just take the raw footage, or if you know somebody that has a YouTube channel, or if they're a video producer, if you know a video producer, make one of these that is speaking to Russians and Ukrainians, speaking directly to them. Listen to it a few times, especially if you've got a good voice. Do this and post it and email it. Email the links. Email the originals to anybody you can for posting, and try to influence both sides of this conflict, because it's very, very dangerous. Now, this image, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this image. Voyager 1 was launched in 1977, and it had completed its mission of surveying Jupiter, Saturn, and their moons in 1980, when Carl Sagan asked the astronomers to turn the probe around and take a picture of the Earth. Voyager was only expected to last a little past Saturn, so time was running short. It took another decade, but on February 14th, 1990, NASA turned the probe around and took this picture. The entire Earth filled only 12% of a single pixel. Now long gone from our solar system, Voyager 1 is still reporting back today. I want to read you just one short section out of Pale Blue Dot so that you get the importance of this, and you'll watch it and try and spread it. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all of those emperors and generals, so that in glory and triumph they can become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the barely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings. How eager they are to kill one another. How fervent their hatreds. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In all our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. I want to thank you for watching. Please try to do something to help defuse this situation, whatever you can do, whether it is trying to get somebody else to stop and think about their opinion. Is their opinion going to help lead to World War III and the end of modern civilization? Or is their opinion going to be something that they develop on their own, and are they going to be searching for a solution and putting it out there? Email the pale blue dot to every politician that you can, anybody that has any influence at all on both sides. I want to thank you for watching. I'm Mike Maloney. We'll see you next time.
You know what really pisses me off? Back in 2005, this $20 bill could buy you 22 cheeseburgers from McDonald's. Do you know what this $20 bill can buy you now at McDonald's? Let me show you. Five cheeseburgers. All these cheeseburgers right here, you know how much they cost me? $84. Can someone please tell me how this is possible?
Hey, don't get distracted by this earth, this place that we live for us.
Hi, I want to do another video. On I'm up on the ranch again, and I just wanted to chime in on the debt ceiling illusion. You need to go back to episode 4 of Hidden Secrets of Money and watch, because every 4 years or so they trot out this dog and pony show to whip the public up into a frenzy and to make us take sides. And it doesn't matter which party is in power. The party that is will take the maximum amount of
Wait up. It might be dangerous.
And I just wanted to chime in on the debt ceiling delusion. You need to go back to episode 4 of Hidden Secrets of Money and watch, because every 4 years or so, they trot out this dog and pony show to whip the public up into a frenzy and to make us take sides. And it doesn't matter which party is in power. The party that is in power will take the maximum amount of time before submitting a budget so that there's no time left, and then tell the other party that is going to be against that budget that they have to pass it right away or they're the evil people. And this just happens over and over again. It has been 78 times that this has happened since 1960. And oh my God, the world is coming to an end. And now they are conflating, and I believe this is purposeful, they are conflating the debt default with running into the debt ceiling and a government shutdown. A debt default is when we can't pay, and we're basically telling the rest of the world, okay, U.S. Treasury bonds are no good. We're not paying you. That's a default. Or we're giving you a haircut. You'll get 80 cents on the dollar. But this is a debt ceiling that they've run into. We have roughly $5 trillion of tax income, and we're planning on spending $7 trillion, and that is the problem. The problem lies at the feet of all of the politicians, not just the ones that are red or blue. You just have to lay the blame at the feet of every politician that keeps on promising to spend more than our income to you. This is their promise. They are going to leave you and your children deeper in debt tomorrow than you are today. And we're at a point, there will come a day where this is like the end of the road. It just doesn't seem like, it seems like this is the same as it has been over and over and over again, but they keep on trying to whip us into an even greater frenzy and cause you to take sides and create more division and derision inside this country. So that, I mean, I've never seen it at a level where people hate each other as much as it is today. So go and watch the debt ceiling delusion, because this just keeps on happening over and over again. They run into this imaginary ceiling, and there's all these threats, and then they raise the ceiling. And what good is a ceiling if it keeps on going up? I mean, it's 70, it's 19. This has happened. Now, my book will be coming out in a week, and at that point, there's a lot of content that we're going to be giving away for free. It is actually part of the book, but it's content that you're going to be able to get visiting a website, you can email it to one another. And this is the heart of how the monetary system works and how all of this comes to be, this crazy debt ceiling debacle that we have every 4 years. And so if you learn how to see through this smoke, it will benefit you for the rest of your life. And you'll be able to see this thing as the joke that it is, because this is just a really bad joke that is being perpetrated on all of us. And it is being perpetrated. This isn't something that is like an accident. This isn't something that truly is an emergency. If it was an emergency, they could have gotten ready for it many, many years ago, and they could have planned to spend less in this budget and create a budget to the benefit of both sides. Regardless of what side is in power, what they will always do is take the maximum amount of time to present the budget. This budget should have been presented 3-4 months ago, but they use up all of the time so that they can then present it and tell the other party. Doesn't matter whether it's the Republicans telling the Democrats or the Democrats telling the Republicans, okay, if you don't pass this tomorrow, you're the evil guys. That is the goal, to make somebody evil and to keep you off filter. Learn as much as you can about economics and how the monetary system works, and you know that this whole thing is just a joke. It's just a scheme that they are perpetrating all of this. And it does need to come to an end. Because if it doesn't come to an end because of something we've done about it to prevent this from happening, it will come to an end very badly someday in the future. I want to thank you for watching. See you next time.
Do you know what pisses me off? Back in 2005, this $20 bill could buy you 11 Crunchwrap Supremes from Taco Bell. Do you know how many you could buy now in 2025 with this $20 bill? Let me show you. only two. Only two. This entire stack right here cost me $84 with tax. Can someone please tell me how this is possible?
Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution for the United States of America. Legislative. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin that tender in payment of debt, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law or law of impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. No state shall, without the consent of the Congress, lay any imports or duties on imports or exports, except what may be absolutely necessary for executing the inspection law. And the net produce of all duties and imposts laid by any state on imports or exports shall be for the use of the Treasury of the United States, and all such laws shall be subject to the revision and control of the Congress. No state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded and in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay.
Hi, I'm up on the ramp. Do you know what really pisses me off? Back in 2008, this $20 bill could buy you 4-foot-long BMT subs from Subway. And now in 2025, this $20 bill can only buy you one. Only one. Can someone please tell me how that is possible?
All the fiat currencies that exist right now were born on August 15th of 1971 or later. Because before that, all of the British pounds and all of the different currencies around the world were backed by gold through the U.S. dollar. So when Nixon severed the tie to gold, he changed. The U.S. dollar after August 15th was a completely different dollar than before August 15th, 1971. And if all the other world's currencies were backed by the U.S. dollar, that means all of the other currencies became unbacked on that date. And so we're in this grand experiment that has never been done before, where all of the world's currencies are fiat currencies simultaneously. This is new territory. This is a monetary experiment that is conducted on a scale never before seen. And we know that every time this experiment was conducted in the past, that currency would eventually fail and people would rush to other currencies and to gold. Well, now there's no other currency to run to. There is only gold and silver, and that's it.
Do you know what really pissed me off? Back in 2008, this $20 bill could buy you 4-foot-long BMT subs from Subway. And now in 2025, this $20 bill can only buy you one. Only one. Can someone please tell me how that is possible?
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
With a little bit of a simple kind of drama around the fire, blind eyes open when the rock's moving from the right. Gentle giant shining on the bomb tracks off the fact that relation, then we put it on wax like that.
Welcome to another Cold Fusion video. I'm going to start this video off with a quote. Henry Ford once said, "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before." It encapsulates the fact that the contents of this video may be unsettling compared to the videos that I normally make. I still feel compelled to make this video because I've been exploring the financial world for the last 4 years, and it's definitely given me a more complete view of the world. I want to share some of what I've come across with you guys. I'm also going to do a video about cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin in the future, and to understand why Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies may continue to rise, it's critical that you understand the contents of this video. I hope that you find this topic interesting and that it inspires you to do your own research afterwards. Now, with that said, let's begin.
Best head bob than anybody you know. I let the rest get calm and rock the building with flow. I get the best head strong.
So who controls all of our money? It's a simple question. We all know that you and I don't control it. Our employees don't control it. The companies that they work for don't control it. So who does? Where does it even come from in the first place? I'll give you a hint. Money does not come from the government. It's a seemingly obvious question that's never asked or taught in schools for some reason. Unfortunately, most people's lives are basically dedicated to money. It's all people ever worry about or talk about. We go to school to learn basically how to go to university, to learn the skills to get a good job, so that we can trade hours of our lives, all for this thing called money. So why wouldn't you want to know where money comes from and who issues it? Today, in this very special video, you're about to find out the answers to the question of who controls all of our money. People today can tell something isn't quite right with our financial system, but they just can't put their finger on it. Some people think it's the failure of government, others think that it's the failure of capitalism itself. This video should clarify a few things. The year is 1694, and England had just suffered through 50 years of war. Exhausted, the English government needed loans to fund their political means. Brainchild of Scottish banker William Paterson, it was decided that a privately owned bank that could issue the money to the government out of thin air was to be the solution. This was the very first modern central banking system in the world. Central banking is more influential than laws, governments, and politicians, but strangely not the focus of the general public. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and after 2 failed attempts, a group of bankers wanted to put a central bank in the United States of America.
Someone just got 200,000.
In the United States of America. It was others.
We'll come back. Finish it. Thank you. Thank you. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And smash that bell button and leave a comment down below. Intuitive. Open.